Welcome back. As you saw earlier in the newscast, New Brunswick is forecasting a deficit for the fiscal year to the tune of $105 million. Deloitte Canada has released its economic outlook, the fall outlook for the country. It gauges the fiscal health of the country, and the regions included, of course, Atlantic Canada. Dawn Desjardins is chief economist at Deloitte Canada and our guest this evening. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, too.
Okay, right off the top, I love this. I'm going to get you to explain this. The title, it's complicated. The conditions required for Canada's economic comeback. Why is it complicated?
Well, it's complicated because we're living in an extraordinary period with respect to uncertainty and with governments, I guess, outside of Canada that are having a material impact on our outlook and how we navigate and work our way through this period is not straightforward. So in other words, it's complicated.
So do you build that into your forecasting? I mean, here you have an American president who just today announced 100% tariffs on the film industry. We had kitchen cabinets last week, pharma last week. Who knows what it could be next week?
What we've done is we are maintaining an assumption that any goods that Canada sells or exports to the United States, as long as they are compliant with the Canada, U.S., Mexico Free Trade Agreement, that they will continue to go across that border relatively tariff-free. Now, we know that certain industries are being impacted by different types of tariffs, and those ones remain in place. And so we have to add that to the mix. Again, part of this complicated story, add that to the mix as well. But when we've calculated it, what we've discovered is that on average, the effective tariff rate for Canada is a little below 3%. So compared to other countries, it's not that bad. But again, that's a pretty big assumption we're making with this projection.
There's been much speculation. In fact, many have said it's almost certain that Canada is going to go into recession. You think we could avoid it? May not happen?
Yeah, we do now. And I mean, we had a recession call 3 months ago. Since that time, I think we've seen a few things that suggest to us that we may avoid recession. Now, we're not calling for strong growth by any means, but we do think we might avoid another contraction. And there's quite a few factors involved in that. One is that we are seeing interest rates move down again. The Bank of Canada cut the policy rate in September. We think they probably will do so again in October. So getting that rate to 2.25%. So just a little bit more support for Canadian households who may be refinancing their mortgages, for example, or for Canadian businesses who are looking to borrow. Again, we have those carve-outs, and that to us keeps Canada's export market. It's not going to be soaring by any stretch, but it will hopefully recover some of that enormous loss that we suffered in the second quarter. Additionally, what we're hearing from governments, and as you said earlier, New Brunswick reporting a deficit, governments are very much trying to put in place programs that will be supportive of the economy, ranging from the reduction in interprovincial trade barriers, which our analysis suggests over time, so again, not immediately, but over time, could be a big lift to GDP, as well as what we're hearing from the federal government, which we won't know for sure the details until November's the 4th budget, but nonetheless, talk about infrastructure spending. So these are the factors we think that tilt the scales towards avoiding recession.
Less concerned about those deficits?
Well, yeah, I mean, we look at it in a global context, even though our deficits are growing. Our biggest trading partner has an extremely big deficit that is continuing to grow. So, yes, we have to be mindful. We don't want to go back to any mid-90s type of situation where we were really having to pay up to attract capital to finance our deficits. And I think, all of the ground we've made over the past few decades puts us in a better spot. But having said that, yes, of course, we'll have to be mindful of how big these deficits get and when the return on all of these investments start to flow in.
I know that you've You've looked at each region in the country, so let's look at Atlantic Canada. In terms of growth, there's a little bit of good news and bad, depending on what province you're in.
Yes, for sure. And so when we're looking at on a provincial basis, where we are seeing some pressure is in Brunswick, actually. You know, we have lumber tariffs there that are being impacting that economy. They send a lot of their exports to the US. When we look at Nova Scotia, though, you know, we're seeing lots of public sector stimulus that is going to be, we think, supportive for the economy. So when we look at 2026, for example, Nova Scotia coming in at about 2%, PEI 1.9, Newfoundland 2, and then again, when we look at New Brunswick, it's going to be stronger than 2025. We have at 1.6%, but still, of the four provinces, a little bit on the slower side.
All right, before I let you go, if I'm sitting at home and I'm worried about my own budget and I'm looking at the price of groceries, power bills, whatnot, but I'm hearing what sounds like rather encouraging news from you, how do I reconcile that?
Well, I mean, I think what we're seeing now is there are pressures on inflation, but when we look overall, the inflation rate running about 2%. Now, the thing about the economy is even though we are projecting growth in 2026 that is firmer than this year, we still have a lot of spare capacity in the system. And to our minds, that means that we will see price pressures ease. Now, when I say that, to be completely clear, it means they'll grow more slowly. It doesn't mean we're going to see big declines in prices, but more on average, price gains will be limited to that about 2% rate.
Don Desjardins of Deloitte, thank you very much for that. It's an interesting, the fall outlook, interesting. People can find it at your website, and we appreciate you explaining that to us tonight.
Thank you.
We'll take a break. Much more of your show on the other side.